be good.
Cool. Yeah, so I was kind of just saying that around November, a couple months ago, I noticed a shift where it was almost like my default went from being depressed to not being depressed, which meant periods of depression were getting shorter, and still in the beginning it was quite long, and then okay, now it would only go for a week, and then there was a time where it was only for a couple days, and another time it was just for a few hours, um, and that's been really nice. And it's not. I almost kind of thought that that was sort of gone forever, and then recently I had another brief period where I ran into some things in my life that uh, you know kind of put me back in that state. But now I have this confidence that I can kind of work through it, and um, so that's been really good.
Congratulations. Yes. That that confidence that you just mentioned is an important key point on the path. So much so that the Buddha makes a point of it in Sutta number 48. And in that regard, what he does is that first he lists the five hindrances and calls them not hindrances but obstructions in this sutta. And then he makes the statement that no matter how obstructed the mind gets, that the student knows that he can come out of that, come back into a state of the here now so that he can see what's going on, what's real. And that this is the first knowledge of the path that is super mundane. It is noble, is a factor of the path, and that it's not held by ordinary people. And so when you say things like that, or in fact, when any student would say that, my antenna go right up because I know what that point is.
Mm.
And that's that point of confidence that now you know that even depression, no matter what it is, it'll kick into it. You'll eventually, not even eventually in a long term, but
Mm-hmm.
eventually in a very short order, you're going to wake up to that depression, see what it is, take a deep breath, and start working your way out of it immediately.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so even Goenka talks about the stages the way that you did, but he used the example of anger. And that there's another way of talking about it in the sense of in this present moment, that when you recognize that there is depression there right now, not have to reflect upon how long it's been there, but as soon
Mm-hmm.
as I see that there is a bunch of stuff there, I can take a deep breath right then and start to move right out of it right then and there. So then that will mean that these depressions are going to start getting shorter and shorter
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to watch them and catch them quicker and quicker. But it's right in the beginning that is sometimes we can get caught into something for a week or so before
Mm-hmm.
we figure out. But once
Yeah,
we figure it out, we can come right out of it.
and it's definitely a big improvement over that being just how it was every day. Even to me, just to say that, like, oh, it only lasted a week, even that sounds pretty amazing. And it's clearly getting shorter, so yeah,
Well,
that's good.
congratulations. That's a very, very good report.
Yeah.
I mean, that shows that you're really moving along with the path.
Yeah, and I'm really grateful to have this Sangha in Seattle. Just I mean I see them once a week, but that's been just so vital. It's the same thing. It's like if I get myself into a depressed state, but I make sure I go there once a week. If I happen to be in a depressed state when I go there, I get another hit of the confidence, and oh look, I can see it in these other people that it's working. It's really
Is
good.
this the pragmatic Dhamma on
This
Friday night?
exactly what I see Noah almost every week.
Oh, well, I just had a conversation about that with Eric, who was
Yeah,
there his first
he
night.
visited. I met him.
Well, that's great. You guys would make good buddies because he and you are right in there at about the same point.
Oh, cool. Yeah, some of the stuff he had mentioned was just very impressive. I was like, wow, really, you're really doing it. um, yeah.
Yes, it's good for students to have inspiration from each other. At that level, students talking together is very good. However, when the students are talking together to reinforce delusions
Mm-hmm.
and magical
Yeah.
thinking,
Yeah.
then that's unfortunate for them. But when you're practicing correctly and know that you are, and meeting friends on the path that are doing the same, that's Kaliya Metta.
Yeah. What is that called?
Kaliya Metta
Okay. What
or
is Kali?
Kaliya Metta. And it basically means spiritual friend.
Okay. Cool.
Friend along the path, which the Buddha has actually said in one talk when Ananda asked him, because Sariputta had said that having friends in the Dhamma is half the path. And so Ananda comes trotting
Yes.
over to the
Yeah.
Buddha, and the Buddha said, oh no,
It's
that
the whole.
having friendships is the whole of the path.
I've been watching for the past 4 or 5 months now, more or less, maybe 3 or 4 months, a motivational video every day. And it's been interesting to see how right attitude presents differently. Because you'll have some guy who's a Buddhist in one video, and another video you've got like this Navy SEAL, and he's also got right attitude. Like he's got the confidence to follow his path, but his path
Mm-hmm.
is so different. So it's been interesting to see.
That's excellent. Yes. Congratulations for seeing that. That, yes, that can do attitude is actually required in certain professions in order for someone to be good at it.
Mm,
Um, but it also has a downside in the sense that many of the people will do it competitively, in the sense of I am, but I've got to show you first.
mm, okay.
And so they have to go around proving I am rather than, and therefore not actually gaining the actual good feeling of being the winner.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not about I am at all. It really is about, can you control the feelings so that you can put the kind of feelings that you want to have, very superior feelings, in there, like confidence, which you're talking about. And along with confidence, in fact, a brother word for that would be success. Because without success, wherefore without confidence?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Confidence and success go hand in hand completely together.
Yeah.
And along with that confidence, also then comes a feeling of satisfaction and also security.
Mm.
Because otherwise, people without that security are going to feel tense and uptight and want to compete to prove to themselves that they are what they think of themselves to be. And so in this practice, we're actually going for the feelings that we're looking for rather than the ideas that would make those things.
Yeah. And I've noticed that when I've been watching the videos, it's almost not important what they're saying. It's just the way they're saying it in and even the word, I was thinking I was inspired by them, and I looked up the because I heard this somewhere. The etymology of the word inspire means to
Mhm.
breathe in,
Yeah,
and so I thought that
exactly.
was so interesting. um, but it does kind of feel like that. Like I sit there and I just try to like I just try to feel how they're behaving and how they view things, and it kind of there was one with Bruce Lee and his kind of, he was saying how, like, if he wants to move his body moves. It's always like that, and he always has the like, he has no doubt that his body will do what he wants it to do. And I thought it was very interesting, and it seemed very it reminded me of samadhi. There was no conflict in his mind. It was,
Hmm.
we're doing this. It was,
Yes, he would be one who could do that. And I would go so far as to say, I think his name is Jackie Chan, will go him one better because he'll do it with great humor.
yeah, he will do it with great humor.
And that's like
That's a good
the
idea.
extra finesse, right?
Cool.
But
Oh.
but Bruce Lee was up to that.
Mm-hmm.
Another one who was up to that was Muhammad Ali. Or
Yeah, absolutely.
okay, so this is the quality of human being that we will then, even though these guys in this regard come from sport, they can come to that. I would go so far as to say part of the misunderstanding of Picasso was because he knew that he had arrived, that he
What
had
it?
gone.
I don't
Well,
know, I guess, enough about Picasso, but
neither do I. I'm just making an example.
yeah.
And so there is that, it's that security that when the fear melts away, that's
Nice.
almost like saying that's when we put the self-preservation instinct actually on hibernation or on hold so that we actually feel secure. And when we feel secure, that's when we can really let go of the kinds of fears that keep us stuck in delusion.
Mm-hmm.
An example of that is to let go of magic because I feel confident enough with this practice that I can figure out actually who I am without looking at it in a magical way.
Mm.
Because the self is actually the root of all magic. All of Christianity, for instance, is not around gods and heavens and spiritual beings and all of that. It's the individual soul who is fitting himself into this cosmology that makes it worthwhile getting into. In other words, it's always selfishness. How do we fit into whatever dream or picture that we're painting for ourselves without recognizing that it's all magic?
Mm.
And so coming back to reality is really what this practice is to be here now, which means to come out of the magic of the past and the magic of the future and the magic of couldas and wouldas and shouldas into this is good enough right now.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that when I am in that depressed state, again, it's becoming, even just because I've now been through this like kind of cycle a few times, it's becoming even more it's like becoming closer to the, like it's harder and harder. So when I re-entered this like depressive state for the most recent time, it was like, even though I knew being present was what was satisfactory,
Mm-hmm.
there was something that I didn't want to be present to that was strong enough that it's like my brain flipped a switch and I did, everything, all the strategies I know how to not be present simultaneously. Um,
How
and
about the
that's,
breathing? Because that's generally the one that's needed the most,
yeah.
is to start taking deep breaths when you recognize you're in a state of depression.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, part of what's depressed is your mind, and part of the reason why it's dull is because it's not getting enough oxygen. So that's why we always put that as first on the list of right efforts. The first right effort is to take and make the chest breathe, get it going, take a few deep breaths. The second right effort is to also gladden the mind or being pleased that we're doing this. Oh, I'm so glad that I was remembering to breathe. Wow. Without this good deep breath, I might get myself worked up into a depression tizzy
Yeah.
or something. And
Yeah.
speaking of that word tizzy, they have linked depression and anxiety together as basically two opposites of the same continuum, but it depends upon which part of it that the student recognizes as to which way it's labeled. But in fact, um, possibly the way they introduce that is by understanding the relationship of why a word is translated out of the Pali as sometimes restlessness and sometimes boredom.
Which word is translated as that?
I don't remember. Don't test me like that. I'll have to go
Okay.
look it up. Let's see,
No
where would
worries.
that word be? Because I can do it, but it'll just take a minute. So,
No, it's all
uh,
right.
um, yeah, Sutra number 39 would be a place to start looking. So, uh, that restlessness and boredom are actually the same thing if you dissect it, in the sense that when the kids say that they're bored, really what they mean is that their mind won't stay focused on what's going on, is agitated and wanting to move around. When you then take restlessness and boredom as language out and put depression and anxiety in place, you'll see that relationship immediately.
Mm.
So the depression actually is a kind of a boredom that does have agitation built into it. And one of the qualities of both of these things is that it's not satisfactory. And also, what if you got stuck in this and now there's an element of fear?
Mm.
And so it takes us down a level into emotion that if you start deep breathing, you can pull yourself out of that, because those deep emotions are actually more of the reptilian brain that doesn't require a whole lot of oxygen, but it's the guy in charge.
Mm-hmm.
And it will shut down the frontal cortex if the frontal cortex hasn't got enough oxygen to operate. This is why we get dull,
Mm.
or why people will experience anxiety and whatnot, is because now the kind of feelings that the reptilian brain would want to put out, it can put out.
Mm.
But when the frontal cortex is watching what's going on, and we're alert to things like that, and taking deep breaths to make sure that the brain stays oxygenated, and pay the kind of attention in the sense of gladdening the mind. I really like taking a few deep breaths when I'm depressed.
Mm. Yeah.
And
Yeah, it was absolutely the breathing. In fact, the main thing that helped me start doing the breathing was taking a cold shower. That
that'll
kind
do
of
it.
that'll do it, and it did it. It was remarkable. And in the past, my descent into depression and coming out of it has always been, since it's been more of a long-term thing, it's been more gradual. And in this most recent time, I went from a place of great satisfaction all the way down and then all the way back up in a very relatively shorter period of time. It was interesting to see that it was different. There was parts of it were very hazy and I just was kind of lost, and then other parts of it were anxious, and then other parts of it were depressed, and so that was
So you
uh
do experience that anxiousness and the depression as same uh, two different aspects of the
yeah,
same coin.
yeah, and they're definitely not, they're definitely separate. There's, usually I guess I don't feel them both at the same time, although maybe I do, I don't know, but
Okay, but that's exactly because of the way that you perceive them. Now that you know that they're the same thing, you can begin to perceive it differently, and you can recognize, oh yes, they're together.
mm, yeah,
And it depends upon the way that I'm previewing it as to which aspect that it is. Just check this out. This
yeah,
is going to
I
help
will,
you
I'll pay
do your
attention to it.
investigation.
Yeah, yeah. I had and part of it was interesting. So some of the other times I've pulled myself out of depression, I've done it using right attitude and confidence, and kind of just being like, I can do this. Um, this time there was a slight difference where I almost went like because I'd done it a few times, so I knew, okay, I can do this. But it wasn't I can do this. It was, oh, I know that in the past I have done it, so I should be able to do it now. And it was
Mm-hmm.
almost an imposition that I placed on myself instead of just having that attitude. And when I took the cold shower and it was unpleasant, I almost just gave up, and I said, you know what, I can't do it. I give up. You win. And then the second I said that, and I got out of the shower, I was fine. And then I was like, oh no, I can't do this. But
Yes, you
it was so weird. I almost it was almost like if I trick myself, if I'm not doing right attitude the correct way, and I'm actually doing wrong attitude, but in a way that mimics right attitude.
yes. Uh-huh.
Um, I almost need to like break down that fake right attitude, uh, and kind of challenge it. I don't know. It was a weird experience because I almost said to myself, okay, I hate how this shower feels. I hate how cold it is. Um, but you know what? This is, if it's gonna be this painful for the rest of my life, that's fine. I accept it. And then once I accepted it, it wasn't so bad.
Mm-hmm.
So that was cool.
So the not liking is intense in the beginning, but it fades very quickly.
Yeah. And I think if you fight it, it doesn't. But if you just
Yeah, if
get
you don't like it, if
yeah,
you don't like it, exactly so, then you make it worse. That's funny how that kind of dukkha is that I mean, it's like a flash in the beginning, but then you say, okay, I can handle this, or I'll get used to it, or this isn't so bad, or any of those kinds of words that all take you in the direction of can do,
yeah,
rather than having the whole language set of, I don't like it, I can't do this is hard, wow, this is cold, and I don't like it,
mm,
like that.
yeah,
The question is, am I still standing in the shower by the time I finish saying that,
yeah,
or have I already stepped out of the shower?
exactly. And that was the thing, is what I did was, even though I was saying, oh, I can't do it, I give up. I just stayed there,
Mhm.
and I was fine. I have
Yes,
a
that's it. There was something in there that was saying I can do this.
yeah, Yeah, exactly. There, even though my thoughts were saying I can't do this, I didn't move. I didn't. Even part of me wanted to get out of the way, but I didn't get out of the way. I just stayed. That's interesting. I have one more kind of like powerful experience. I was on a road trip with my parents. It was just my parents and I. And so it was a lot of like close quarters with my parents for a long time, which for me has a lot of triggers. I think for a lot of people it's like this. And so a few days into the trip, I had slowly started to collapse and not be joyful, not be present, not be kind. Um, and as I was collapsing, I got to this place. I ended up staying at a friend's place, and I smoked weed. Um, and I smoked it was a vape. It was a vape, and so they have these vape oil concentrates, and they are super strong. Um, and I don't smoke weed that much, and so I had too much of that, and I was lying down in bed, and I was going through all of the ways that I had not acted um, in a good manner over the earlier part of that road trip, and it was interesting. It was almost like a blissful, so it was a very blissful experience, but when I would accept, oh yeah, that was definitely not a nice way to act, and I shouldn't act that way in the future. Uh, Whenever I would accept that, the bliss would just amplify. It was almost like, I was being egged on to just keep accepting more and more and more. And so that was a really powerful experience. Um, and I kind of just went through most of why I had been acting that way. Okay, yes, this person acted this way, but I don't need to then take that on and shut down because of it. And for the rest of the trip, I acted much better, and it was a much more fun trip. And so that was very interesting to me, and there was something about the intense bliss that made it much easier to accept these kind of unpleasant realizations of like, oh yeah, I've been kind of an asshole in this way or that way.
You're saying it in a most humorous way, but this is exactly what I tell students, that if you can get yourself into a nice state of satisfaction, which you were in with the weed, then you can look at this stuff without having to jump into it.
Yeah. It was
so that would be the way that I would describe it, and now you're describing it in your own way, but this is exactly what we're talking about, is to be in the world but not of the world, or being super mundane, to get above it so that you can take a look at it.
Yeah, that's it. I've heard somebody else say something similar to that. I heard this phrase, you must be the most engaged and the least attached. And that kind of I have to sort of be, so I have to like really, if I'm interacting with people, I have to really like be present and be engaged with them. But at the same time, if they act in a way that would normally make me angry, I have to not be attached. I need to like, it's almost like if someone threw a jacket at you and you just didn't catch it, it kind of like hits you and falls down.
Exactly. Except that with sati, we're going to be a little bit more on our toes so that we can deflect that jacket because we saw it coming in midair. Now that's an analogy, but you could also do that in the sense that you can almost see the setup when someone's about to insult you. They'll give you about a 1 or 2 sentence advanced warning.
Yeah, that's true. You kind
Sort
of
of
see it
like the
coming.
wind up for a pitch.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, absolutely. You kind of even if they're not, and if it's anything that would hit one of your triggers, you kind of know it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And you're on guard for it because you're awake. And you're awake because you practice being awake. That's the primary practice, is to wakey. Let's be here now. Let's see what's going on. And that's especially a good idea when you're around other people.
yeah.
So that's another part of right effort. And those two work together. One is to actually do the breathing, to take the breath. And then the other one is the intention to watch, to be on guard, to keep sati going.
Yeah.
And that's easier to do when we got the right attitude. And that right attitude is, yeah, we can do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when during this sort of previous essentially the longest period of not being depressed that I've experienced in any recent years, I noticed that suddenly I was more disciplined. The kind of the right attitude spread not just beyond the breathing, but into, oh, I'm just gonna, here's a schedule that works for me, and if I do this schedule, um, things are generally better. I got to make sure I, socialize a little bit. I got to make sure I at least go get a walk if I'm not exercising a little bit. Uh, and I, in the past, when I've tried to have discipline, or I used to watch self-help videos and be like, okay, I got to have this, I got to get some discipline. And every time I tried to do it, it never worked. I would always give up a day or two into it at the most. And so to me, this experience of doing it for a month, and it wasn't even difficult. It wasn't difficult. I just did it, and it was great that if I didn't do something, I wouldn't beat myself up at all, and that was pretty cool too. I was just like, all right, well, we're at the end of today. What do you want me to do now? um, and that was really great, and so it's been very interesting just to see how that relates, and it's almost a little bit of a double-edged sword, because now then I have the can-do attitude, and I'm almost trying to do a little bit too much, or I'm trying to do more because I know, oh, look at all these things I can do, and then I'm like, I kind of get caught, and then I'll generally recognize it, um, or I just won't have enough time, or I won't do it, and then I'm okay with that too. So
In that regard, one time I had a really deep flash of insight that really put the brakes on part of the brain and the way that it worked. And that is that here I am as a budding computer scientist, can define and design all kinds of different databases and do this business plan and that one and all this kind of other stuff. But I can't do them all. Each one of them takes a year or two. How many ideas do I have? And then I wind up recognizing I have a whole lot many more ideas than I have actual things that can be done. And that was humbling to recognize that basically what I was doing is I was dreaming rather than actually living in reality at that moment.
yeah,
And that I was making myself disappointed because I knew that I would never be able to get reality to catch up with my dreaming.
yeah, yeah. It's almost like if you have all these different potential sort of dreams for your future, if you only focus on them, you won't even get one for right now. You won't even. Uh, yeah, that's interesting you say that, because I've been I've been getting thoughts. I've been getting more and more thoughts now that I'm in a state of satisfaction of like I guess in the beginning, I was concerned, and often still am, about just being satisfied for one moment or just one meditation sit, and as that kind of scope expands and I have confidence, I can be satisfied for longer periods of time. That's having me look at like how I'm spending my time, and so I've been having a lot of thoughts around career and what I want to do. If I'm going to be working a job, and that's a lot of hours every day, how do I really want to spend that time, or how do I spend that time in a way that's enjoyable? I've got no problem. I'm actually in school right now, but the previous job that I was working at, I enjoyed it. It was fine. It wasn't overly stressful like some of my previous jobs, and I don't know. It's been interesting. I'm going to keep kind of rambling a little bit, but I had both a therapist and a social worker that I was just talking to in conversation. Then the therapist said, I think, Aman, you would make a really good therapist. And the social worker said, like, I think you would, are you a social worker or in some sort of related field? And so it's interesting because I enjoy talking, and there was even an acquaintance that I made, and I talked to him for an hour, much similar to the way that you talked to me, and he was playing. We talked about essentially what's causing him dukkha, and then I helped him. He was already listening to affirmations on YouTube, and they reminded me very much of the phrases you would use for metta. So I just recommended he do metta, because he's already doing something similar. And so that I got such a high off of talking to him. I felt so good, and I was just transmitting right attitude. I was just embodying right attitude, and by the end of it, and the problems he had were problems that I know. I almost, when he was telling me about his problems of like, in all of these relationships, I've been in abusive relationships, and I was like, wow, I feel so out of my depth to help him with problems like these. But I could see at the end of the talk, like, he had a sense of right attitude, and he felt empowered. And so anyways, I don't really know where I'm going with this, but I can see myself wanting to do more of that. And I'm good at coding, and I'm good at my software job, but it certainly doesn't feel as good as how that felt.
Well, I understand what you're saying precisely because I've been there, done that. That after I had done master's in electrical engineering in computer science, later I got involved with a group at University of Michigan and a center called Huron Valley Institute. And that the whole thing there was therapist training.
Mm.
I guess I could say that I kind of got greedy when I realized way, way, way into it, so that I began to understand this better and talk to people who were at my level. Was that many of the PhD candidates felt stuck already because after they get their PhD in clinical psychology, because they didn't have any other things then, who wants to be a clinician working in a mental health hospital, especially since that was a time when they were all getting closed down in the early 70s. So that meant that most people are going to have to look at going into private practice, and that was literally terrifying people as to how long it was going to take, because all of the people that there was a lot of jobs that they could have, and in fact, many of them did have or still have as social workers and all kinds of things, including occupational therapists and nurses and all kinds of things then. But once they get that PhD in clinical psychology, now they can't do the job that they used to do. Now there's pressure on them to move up, and there's no place to go.
Mm-hmm.
So that I'll warn you. But
Yeah.
was the climb to the top worth it? It certainly was. Boy, did I learn a lot. And you may not be as high on the computer science ladder, because nowadays it's it literally has gone from the status of an expert to the status of a nerd. That's how far computer science has fallen.
Yeah.
And you got to throw
Absolutely.
hack and other things into it too. So being at the
Yeah.
top of one's game by being
It's
a computer scientist doesn't mean anything the way that it used to.
absolutely, yeah. It's much more of yeah. It's definitely more casual in a way.
Or you could say it, if you can't code, you didn't go to school right.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's and so I've been kind of thinking about that, and I kind of I almost feel like I don't necessarily want to go become a therapist, go through that process of schooling. I don't know. Anyways, these are thoughts that are, they're very I'm sure these will change over time. In the meanwhile, I'm still working on my own personal satisfaction. But yeah, I'm curious. I mean, even things like I on my phone I follow like Instagram channels, and these guys are these guys have wide reach, and so there's I don't know, I feel like with technology there's a lot of potential for doing so. I don't know. Anyways, so it's not something
It's
I want.
actually a lot of fun to spread the Dhamma. That's part of the benefit of it, but it also has kind of a built-in obligation. Once you see right to the end what the teachings of the Buddha really are all about and how marvelous they are, you want to spread it. You want to let it out. And so that's why I feel so comfortable with doing it, but I wouldn't do it without Ajahn Po's pushing. But he's doing that pushing, and I say, okay, I'm up to the task. I'll go do it. But I want your support behind.
Yeah.
And that's what the value of the lineage is to know that you've got teachers from Ajahn Po and Bhikkhu Buddhadasa right on back.
Hello?
Yeah, okay, so you're back. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
I think that's all I got for today.
Well, I think that's a lot.
Yeah.
You came and brought a quite a dump load.
Yeah, it's been a while. So
okay. So, but this is good progress. Congratulations.
I'm very happy with it.
Make sure that you add more air, more breathing. That's the recommendation, is to make sure that you're breathing well. And also add more joy, more satisfaction.
Yeah. Okay.
Recognize it as a skill to be developed. How much of it can you handle right now? Yeah. And so that's the way to practice.
Cool. Awesome.
Excellent. All right.
Awesome.
Well, I'd love to hear from you soon again. Let me hear about that depression stuff.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.